Hi there. This is really, really weird, but thank you for tuning in. I'm Rick Turoczy. I'm the co-founder and general manager of Pi. And what I was hoping to do here was something along the lines of what I do every day in the normal world, in coffee shops, meeting with people, answering questions, helping provide some details about the Portland startup community. So if you're new to Crowdcast, the easiest way to ask me a question is right down there in the middle. There's an ask a question button. And even if you don't have a question, you can go in there and upvote questions that you find compelling so that I'll see them bubble to the top and can start working on answering the questions that people here most want to see answered. You can also use the chat. So in the chat over there, there's, normal chat kind of stuff. Hey, Ron, thanks for coming. So this will be a little rickety and a little weird and awkward, but I'm always weird and awkward. So I'd encourage you to submit questions, hang out in the chat, and to give folks a little time to think of questions or roll in. I see we've got about 40 people here now. I thought maybe what I do is kind of introduce myself and Pi and just give you some context for what I'm trying to do here. So I'm Rick Turoczy. I've been in Portland about 25 years. I moved here in 95. No idea what I was going to do, and then just kind of wound up working in startups. Back then, it was installed software. So this was pre-web. It's people doing things with floppy disks and CDs and that kind of thing. And worked generally in marketing communications roles, sometimes product marketing, product management. I was often the go-between between the engineering team and the executive team. So generally small venture capital funded startups. Did that for about 12 years and then kind of got bored with doing the same thing over and over for different companies and decided to go out on my own. I decided I'd learned enough that I could start my own company, and tried that a couple times and failed a couple times. But what I did discover was this great Portland startup community. And what I encountered in the community was a bunch of really talented folks, often engineers or developers, who were expending their creativity building products or writing code and weren't doing a terribly good job of promoting themselves. So since a lot of this activity was based in the open source community, I decided that my contribution was going to be open sourcing my marketing communications skills. And that's when I came up with Silicon Florist. That was about 2007, August of 2007, and just started writing about what I was seeing happening in the Portland startup community, featuring events or products or hackathons that folks were hosting. And for whatever reason, folks just started reading it. I mean, I've been blogging since the late 90s. No one had ever really read my blog before, so I didn't expect this one to be any different. And for whatever reason, it just kind of struck a chord with folks. And it was because of that blog that Wieden & Kennedy reached out to me. And if you don't know Wieden & Kennedy, they're a global advertising firm. They're headquartered here in Portland. And even if you don't know them, you likely know their work. So they're Nike Just Do It. They're the Coca-Cola Polar Bears. They are the Old Spice guy. They're, very big brand advertising. And they reached out because they were interested in supporting the Portland startup community and wanted to figure out a way to do that. And through that conversation, that became Pi. Pi, at its very most basic, is just an ongoing experiment to figure out how established organizations like corporations or government entities or educational institutions can most effectively collaborate with the Portland startup community for mutual benefit. So we're always trying to figure out ways that the startups are getting something out of it and the corporations or established organizations are getting something out of it. And so we've been doing that for about 10 years. In its current form, Pi exists as a startup accelerator. In our parlance, there's a difference between an incubator and an accelerator. Incubators are very protective environments designed to support founders and protect them from the real world, whereas we see an accelerator as something that introduces you to the real world more rapidly than you would be able to do on your own. So in the analogy of a automotive manufacturing line, incubators are where they're building the cars, accelerators are where they're running those cars into walls to see how they stand up. So that's the kind of work we do. We have three particular areas of focus currently. One is software as a service startups, so traditional web, cloud, mobile-based kind of startups. Our second one is manufactured objects, ideally with a digital component. That project is in collaboration with Autodesk. And so we are looking for things that can be 3D printed or boards that can be printed or that kind of thing, and really helping people build physical objects with a digital component. And then through Built Oregon, we also run a consumer products accelerator. So more traditional consumer products, food and beverage, apparel, outdoor, beauty, that kind of work. So that's the role I play in the community as kind of somebody who tries to bring both startups in and experts, mentors in to help those startups and kind of creating a way for the community to work effectively around the hub that is Pi. Okay, so hopefully that's enough context. If it's not, hit me up in chat, and if you need areas that require more explanation, or there's that ask a question thing right down there. If you drop a question in, I'll get to it as soon as I can. And if folks upvote questions, then we'll get to them even more quickly. So let's dive in and take a look. So first question we've got is, what are the benefits and costs of a SaaS startup joining Pi? So costs, none. Pi is completely free and clear to founders currently. We don't take equity, we don't charge tuition, we don't charge rent. It's very much a program designed to support founders as they're building their businesses without taking much needed capital away from them at their most formative stages. In terms of benefits, it's really kind of like I described before. The benefit of Pi is getting you more quickly networked, more connected within the community, getting you expert mentorship, getting you connections outside of the community that we've built up over the past 10 years, and really trying to help you figure out, most honestly, if you even want to be a founder. I think a lot of folks get into this startup thing thinking they know what it means to be a founder, when in reality, it's just kind of the mythology of being a founder. And what we try and do is expose founders to that reality as quickly as we possibly can to ensure that you know what path you're on and that you want to be on that path. And it's fine if you don't. Sometimes at Pi, we figure out that, you know, folks realize being a founder isn't what they thought it was, and they don't want to be doing that anymore. So a lot of our work tends to be around forcing you to do the unfun stuff about building a company. So the things you might not want to do or don't realize you need to do, that's where Pi's going to help you most. I hope that answers that, Weston. If not, feel free to drop another one in. Next question. For hardware startups that, one just got bumped to the top. Good voting, people. Nice work there. This one has 4 votes. Where do you think there's the most room for improvement in the Portland startup scene? What do we need to learn and just do better as an ecosystem? So I think the greatest room for improvement with Portland now is we're seeing, at least up until the point of this weirdness that we're in right now, we're seeing a huge influx of population into Portland. And prior to that, the Portland startup community had really been operating as a very kind of small town startup community. So not a lot of infrastructure, not a lot of scale. very difficult if you're somebody new coming to town, figuring out how to get connected. If you were making the leap from a day job to being an entrepreneur, it was very hard to figure out where to start. And so I think the greatest improvement that Portland needs now at the scale that Portland, at the scale the city has become, is that we really just need more infrastructure and more ways to efficiently scale so that it's not as hard to be a founder here, so that you don't have to figure your way on your own. I think we could do a lot better with some frameworks and some ways that just provided a repository or resources and were more obvious to people. And then what do we need to learn and just do better as an ecosystem? I think ecosystems take a while to mature. So I feel like Portland's in a good spot for the age and maturity that the Portland startup ecosystem is. We're going to have growing pains. The lack of infrastructure is one of those growing pains. And I think we will kind of continue to work at that, but it's going to be frustrating and it's going to take time. So I can just encourage more folks to get involved, more folks to build those resources that they feel are needed. I think that's the other thing about the kind of small town dynamic is there's the assumption that if one person is doing it, then that problem's solved. And that's often not the case for a city of our size. So I would encourage more people to do more things, even if it creates more noise in the short term, because having more resources accessible to people will improve over the long run. So I think that's the best way to go about it. All right, next question. And thank you all for showing up. We're up to like 57 people. People voting. I'll give folks a second to vote, see if anything pops up. We got a 4 and a 3 right now. So you can just pop into the ask a question down there, and that will allow you to upvote stuff that you're seeing. Let's take this one from Nate De Niro. What is the Portland startup community doing to address the long-term effects on the local ecosystem due to the public health crisis we're in? That's a really great question. Unfortunately, the answer right now, I think, is just not much. I think folks are still in shock. I see folks being very tactical and like trying to solve easy problems or trying to do things that make them feel like they're contributing in a meaningful way to helping to solve this problem. But I haven't started to see the kind of strategic stuff shake loose yet. So I don't see a lot of like long-term vision from folks, which is fine. I mean, most folks have only been kind of sheltering in place for a couple of weeks. I think a lot of us are still grieving and mourning what was normal life and trying to deal with this new reality that we find ourselves in. And we find ourselves in a unique situation that I've never encountered in my professional career. At least in my experience, I went through the dot-com days and the dot-com bust. I went through the mortgage crisis and all those kind of things. This is the first time that I've ever seen the globe going through a very similar situation. And I think it's a unique opportunity for founders and entrepreneurs to take that global pause as an opportunity to be more thoughtful and take the time to think and rest and build up things that could be world changing. I think, there's no way to hustle your way out of what's happening right now. And so I encourage folks to kind of take that time, think about longer term, how they could be helping. And Nate, in particular, if you have any things that you've seen happening in the community or some projects or folks have hackathons. I know Techstars is organizing a global hackathon. I've seen a couple other regional hackathons and that kind of thing. Like if folks have resources, I encourage them to drop them into the chat. I think it's over there on your screen over there. Let's see. if we can start working on some of those issues. I'd also encourage folks to kind of join the Portland Startup Slack. Could be good for folks. That would be another valuable place to kind of compare notes. I also know that the Portland Startup Switchboard has seen an uptick in activity, and so that could be another way to kind of compare notes and share ideas. So I hope that answers that. All right. Excuse me 1 sec. Hopefully my throat. All right. Does Pi work with entrepreneurship programs at PSU, OSU, or U of O? So Pi has, for a long time, worked with Portland State because Portland State had the first accelerator incubator program really of consequence in the city. So at least with this generation of startups. So if folks remember Jive was in the Portland State Business Accelerator back in the day, and they've had a long line of really amazing companies that have come through there. So Portland State, definitely. With Oregon State, the more we've gotten into hardware and engineering, the more we've been chatting with OSU because of their depth of expertise and their huge patent portfolio and the projects they're incubating out of the university. With U of O, on the built side, we've had a number of conversations with their more like sports-oriented programs or sports entrepreneurship or product design. That goes for PSU as well. They've built a consumer products expertise that we've been working with them on that as well. Now no real like formalized programs of that sort, but definitely lots of conversations, share many mentors among those groups, and always looking for ways to engage more effectively with those programs, both for current students as well as alums. So hopefully that helps. Let's take this one. Are there ways to volunteer to become involved in the startup community? That's a great question. As I was saying before, there's, sometimes it's hard to figure out how to engage with the startup community, and especially now that we're all kind of sheltering in place in our own homes, that can become even more restrictive and confusing. So what I always encourage folks to think about is areas where they have a skill or expertise and they are willing to kind of provide that skill or expertise. And that could be through mentorship. I'm convinced anyone can be a mentor. I think some people, I have a great deal of respect for mentors and people who take the time to mentor, but I think some folks discount their ability to mentor. I think a lot of folks in the professional environment have forgotten how truly talented and creative and insightful they are because they do the same job day in and day out, and they start to assume that their common sense is common, and it's not. And so mentoring for programs is a really great way to get involved in the startup community and kind of get you exposure to all of the things that are happening here. Once the world kind of settles into new normal, I think volunteering for events, be they virtual or eventually in the future back in real life kind of events, can be a really great way to get engaged with the community, both locally programmed and managed events, but also, during the summer, a lot of either national or international startup and tech events wind up happening in town. So that can be another really good way to get involved. Again, I've kind of already alluded to it, but the Portland Startup Slack can be a really easy way. And I think Ron or somebody, dropped a link in there. If you go to pdxslack.com, that will just let you in to the Slack. So it's got an open invite. That's a great place to just start poking around. There are hundreds of channels in there. But going back to the mentorship, there are a number of programs in town. I mentioned Portland State Business Accelerator, Pi. There's also WeWork Labs that does a lot of mentoring for people. Accelerate Fund has a bunch of mentors that help them. So there are other programs you can look to see if your area of expertise matches their need, but that's a really great way to get involved. And then this may sound weird, but it's from back in the old days of the Portland startup community. Twitter. Like, folks are super active on Twitter and kind of remain so. So that could be a really easy way to engage in the community. I've seen folks recently just kind of, that's become their on-ramp to the community, and just helping get into conversations there or amplifying content can be a really compelling way to participate with a very kind of low barrier to entry. So hopefully that answers that. All right. Thank you for all the questions, folks. I appreciate it. If you're just tuning in, the easiest way to ask a question is to go to the middle of your screen and click on, it's down at the bottom, and click on the Ask a Question. Even if you don't have a question, you can upvote others' questions, and that way we'll bubble those to the top so we can get those answered. All right, let's see, we got some votes coming in. Okay. What qualities do you find most valuable for startup founders to execute and succeed? Let's start answering. So I'm going to answer this from the context of my experience, because an experience in Pi is very different than maybe an experience in the real world or an experience in another accelerator program. So I will just speak specifically from a Pi perspective, what we appreciate in startup founders and the types of people we try and recruit to our program. So we always think that the most important dynamic of a successful founder is coachability. I think often people think being a founder means you need to be stubborn and have this very strategic vision of where you're going, and no one can dissuade you from that. And what we've discovered in Pi is we do much better with founders who are coachable, who are capable of assimilating feedback and not necessarily directly following that feedback, but assimilating it, processing it, and then making a meaningful decision based on that feedback. I find that skill very impressive. I think we also need to understand that being a founder is extremely stressful and has a significant emotional toil. So founders who have figured out ways of managing that stress effectively can also be very good founders. The founders who have ways of coping or healthy ways of dealing with the pressure they're under tend to be more successful in the long run. And then the other part of it is, sometimes for us, the ability to say no, and that might make them not a founder, right? The thing they may be saying no to is being a founder, but we still see that as success. We see that as a character trait that we want to have in our programs, and hopefully a character trait that makes those folks successful in whatever they do. So I hope that answers that one. If not, drop another one in, please. All right. Is this going okay? You can say no in chat if you want to. This is real weird. I'm just talking to a computer, so hopefully it's going okay. All right, here we go. Got some more votes. All right, let's answer this one. What's the best way to find out about startups looking for team members? I have skills in mechanical product design and manufacturing and would like to join up with a team. This is a really common question for folks. It's very similar to the how do I find a co-founder? I think it's a question that a lot of people come to the table with, right? You've been struck by this idea, you're passionate about it, you want help in making it happen, and you want team members to assist you. And then on the other side, I have skills that I know are valuable to a startup, but I can't quite figure out how to find those startups? What do I do in that case? Which is what this question is talking to. And it's not easy either way. It's a lot of just reaching out to people, kind of figuring out who's working on what. I mentioned it earlier, but some folks have found success on the Portland Startup Switchboard, which is pdxstartups.switchboardhq.com. Maybe somebody will drop that into the chat. That's a place where you can post asks and offers. So coming from this perspective, Brian, you could be like, here's what I have to offer. Here's, thanks, Ron, for dropping that in. I appreciate it. Here's what I have to offer. Here's my skill set. Is anybody looking for this, or do they know people who are looking for this? Again, I mentioned Pdx Startup Slack, but there are a number of other Slacks in town that Slack instances that people are, sharing ideas and skill sets and that kind of thing. So be looking for that. I would say, as we all kind of adjust to this, this new normal, this kind of virtual thing that we're going through, be looking for virtual events where, people either of your skill set or seeking your skill set might gather. Those, once we get back to being able to do in-person events, that's always something I recommend for people, is like, even if you're just curious about the event or what they're discussing, show up. In Portland, people are super welcoming. They'll love to have folks at their events. I think that's going to be a little more difficult here for the foreseeable future. It's going to be this weird kind of like Slack interaction almost, rather than a traditional event. But that's another good way to kind of start getting connected with people. And perhaps most importantly, just continue to tell people and talk to people about what you have to offer and what you're looking for. Portland's very much a word of mouth town. And if you talk to enough people about what you're doing or what you're offering, and there's Michael that would be happy to talk to you. So hit him up. He just put something in chat. So yeah, just talk to more people, and that will kind of socialize throughout the community and throughout the ecosystem. So it's more challenging than it should be. As I said, we don't really have the infrastructure that's needed to support this kind of thing, but we're building it. And so in the meantime, it's going to be a lot more heavy lifting than it needs to be, but we're getting there. Okay. Keep those questions coming. Give you a second to vote. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for contacting Michael. And Michael, thanks for putting that out there. I really appreciate that. Okay, let's take this one. It's got 4 votes. For hardware startups that have R&D they need to do rather than general business help, is there a benefit in joining an accelerator? I hate to be wishy-washy, but it depends. So some accelerators are going to be more focused on just purely the business aspects of it. Some are going to be more focused on the pitch aspect of it, where it's, they're not really terribly concerned about the R&D or the business model. They just want you to be able to tell a good story on stage so that you can raise capital, acquire customers, or whatever that may be. So accelerators are kind of like, these days, kind of like applying to a college. Like, you want to look for an accelerator that focuses on an area of expertise that is valuable to you. So taking PieShop, for example. So with PieShop, we would fully welcome a company that was still very much in R&D, because our partner Autodesk is very interested in how their software is being used during that phase of building businesses. So for a PieShop, our manufacturing accelerator, we take folks all along the spectrum. If you're working on the business, we can help you with the business, but we also appreciate people who are still really struggling for that kind of design for manufacturing kind of thinking. Like they've kind of cobbled something together with a breadboard or a Raspberry Pi or something, and they're looking to create a manufacturable product. That's something that's perfectly fine for PiShop. Now, for other hardware accelerators that may be more focused on the business aspects or the kind of pitch aspects, might not be a good fit for you. But I would look at, there's so many accelerators out there now. In the 10 plus years we've been doing this, we've just seen any number of flavors of accelerator or locations of accelerator. And so it's really, the onus is a little bit on the founders to do their due diligence about the accelerators and figure out which one is the right fit for them. I got a request. Oh, for the Pdx Startup Slack, it's just pdxslack.com. And if you're already registered for it, it'll just throw you in the Slack. If you haven't registered, it should allow you to register there. So that's pdxslack.com, all one word. All right, let's do another question. Thank you for putting that in there. I just thought Paul Graham was in the chat. I don't think that's Paul Graham in the chat room, but you can ask him about accelerators. He knows a thing or two. Do you know of a platform to find a complementary co-founder? There have been any number of these, and no one's really kind of cracked the code on how to do this for folks. There's like co-founder seeking co-founder kind of things. I know a lot of folks get feedback from either mentors or potential investors that having a co-founder or a co-founding team is a critical aspect to moving forward with them. So I know that there are a lot of folks that are trying to figure that out. And the fact of the matter is nobody's really done it terribly well. It's really just a matter of, again, kind of socializing what you're working on, sharing as much as you can to help people understand what you're building. Like, don't be afraid to talk about what you're building. I always tell people that if you're afraid that sharing what you're building is going to cause somebody else to be more successful with that idea, then maybe you're not the best person to execute that idea if it's that fragile. Like, ideally, you should be passionate and confident about the idea you're pursuing, and sharing it with anyone is only going to get you good feedback and help from others. So again, just kind of socialize that you're looking for a co-founder. Be very explicit about the skill set you're looking for in that co-founder. So not just that you want a co-founder, but that you have expertise in engineering, and so you need someone who's more business minded to be your co-founder. Or maybe you're a successful business person, but you know you're building a technical solution and you need a co-founder who has a more technical mindset. Maybe you need several. Like, maybe the what you're pursuing requires a variety of skills to find a co-founder. But while we're on co-founders, another thing I would just touch on is be very careful with getting into that relationship. It's like any other substantial relationship. It shouldn't be done lightly. You should take your time and do the appropriate due diligence, as should that co-founder of you and your concept. So while I realize startups are hustle, 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 and rush, 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 take the time to find the right co-founder and make sure they have both complementary skills to yours, but that you also both, or the three of you or whatever, have very clearly defined roles and responsibilities where you understand what your job is and you trust them to do their job, and that you're actually working at it as a team. That's one of the most critical aspects that I see more startups fail because of co-founder problems than I do because of funding or marketing or any of that kind of stuff. So just be very careful in that regard. All right, give folks a couple more minutes to vote. And if you want to put a question, it's the ask a question down there. I don't know if Nat's on, but cheers to Reverend Nat. Okay, let's take this one. Playing off mentoring and the question of a startup looking for help, maybe beyond mentoring, is there a platform of us that want to help and have time, a few hours a week even? So we do a lot of this work. Hello, Nat. We do a lot of this work kind of, at a very high touch kind of way at Pi. We don't require our mentors to like contribute significant time. We realize everybody has different schedules and different skill sets. And so like our qualification or commitment from a Pi mentor is you need to be willing to have now one Zoom meeting with one of our startups once a year. And that's about it. We're not looking for you to show up every week or every day. Some mentors choose to do that, and we love them for that, but that's not a requirement. So that Pi is an option there. I know other accelerators and even venture funds in town have people contribute a few hours a week. I know that there are always the needs for kind of critique, like people will have pitch sessions or kind of demos of, or like Founders Live is another good example, or New Tech PDX, where they'll have founders stand up and speak, kind of attending those events and just kind of hearing from people and what they need help with. That can be another really good way of engaging kind of with the light touch. And then I know I've kind of mentioned it a couple times, and I don't want to keep like hammering on it, but nor do I just want to throw technology at a problem. But the Pdx Startup Slack or Switchboard could be another good way to kind of offer up those mentoring hours for folks. Okay, keep those questions coming. All right, let's take this one. Everybody doing okay? Cool. Got about 20 minutes left. I'm happy to go a little over if people have questions. I'm hoping this is valuable. Feel free to bail if it's not, and you can always catch the replay, which is the nice thing about Crowdcast. And we've really enjoyed this experiment with the Crowdcast folks too. So they've been really thoughtful about building this platform. So I encourage you to kind of poke around on this. Okay, how polished of a hardware prototype, MVP, or minimum viable product for folks who don't do the jargon, would you recommend having before applying to PiShop or a hardware incubator? So I think Pi does its best work, PiShop in particular does its best work where you have a fairly polished and working hardware prototype. You don't have to have designed and printed your own board. You don't have to have milled your own housing or anything at that point. But if you have something that works and that kind of demonstrates the function you want it to achieve, that's probably where we have the most opportunity to accelerate your company forward, because you're at a really good point in time for us to bring all of our resources to bear. That being said, if you're struggling with the prototype or MVP and getting some of that kind of expert mentorship or assistance from Autodesk or Fresh Portland or some of our other corporate partners on that project, we will look at those opportunities as well. So we judge stuff more by the people and how coachable they are, how far we think they can get in the accelerator, how much benefit we could actually provide to them, because it's not about us, it's about them as founders. And that falls all along the spectrum for folks. Again, I kind of spoke to this a little bit earlier, but some hardware incubators or accelerators are going to want a very well thought out, designed prototype MVP, like ready for market, designed to be manufactured. It just kind of depends. And I think a good way to kind of figure out how an incubator or an accelerator might judge products is to look at their alums and kind of see who's come out of classes and how far along they were when they came out. If you're seeing a class where most everything is kind of first product, then obviously they're taking stuff a lot earlier. If you're seeing an accelerator or incubator where people are coming out with millions and millions of dollars in funding, then it's likely they're probably taking much more mature products than an MVP. So again, kind of do the due diligence and don't be afraid to ask the incubator or accelerator. I mean, we at Pi would be more than happy to have that conversation with folks just to ensure that they're not getting themselves into a situation that would not be beneficial to them. So don't be afraid to ask the incubator or accelerator what their expectation is. All right, wait for some of the votes are still percolating, so I'm going to close my question window and open it back up. Okay, let's do this one. This is a really interesting one. How do you think the types of startups that have suffered and or thrived in this crisis will affect how investors assess startups in the future? I think speaking from our own experience at Pi, I think we had a couple of really interesting companies that we got to watch firsthand. They were in our previous class, so the class of 2019. And, they had solutions that we very much believed in. We really liked the founders. They were amazing. And yet, we'd taken this leap on their products that we truly recognized the value of, but that was almost too much of an educational hurdle for investors or other folks to kind of believe in the potential. And what we've seen happen now is those models that those founders were building have very much proven out, and their businesses are thriving because we're in a wholly new situation that their businesses were explicitly built for, or they had done the work of building a community that allowed them to activate that community in a meaningful way. And so I think, one of those companies is Milk Run. So localmilkrun.com. They are basically a way to help small local farmers get food to customers while eliminating a lot of the middle people that reduce their margins or help them or take money out of their pocket. And so I think that was a really good example where amazing founder, amazing company, we saw the value. We saw from a Portland perspective how compelling it was, and yet it was an educational hurdle for other markets. Fast forward to today, and now everybody recognizes why Milk Run works because of the situation we're in and because every food system is stressed in a variety of ways. The other one was Work From, and that's workfrom.co, where they had created this amazing community of people who were all remote workers. And now everybody's a remote worker. So that knowledge base and the resources they had built up really have become this compelling community that we can all tap into to figure out how to deal with this kind of new normal. So long-winded way of getting to saying that there's a lot of shift happening. I think, it's probably pretty obvious that investors are going to be cautious for the foreseeable future. I think even if investors are within their current investment window, they still have the luxury of time to kind of press pause and wait to see what will happen. I think most everything I've seen from the investment community has been refocus on portfolio companies. So fewer new investments, more spending time with investments they've already made or reserving capital to help investments that they've already made. So I think, having been through this a couple times before, I think it's going to look a lot more similar to the mortgage crisis kind of investment strategy, where people are going to be very cautious. They're going to do a lot more due diligence. They're going to be more risk averse than they've been in the past. And they are going to probably be asking more of founders than they would have in the past. Obviously, a lot of folks are now suddenly focused on profitability and good business models, whereas before that wasn't as much of a concern to them. So everything's going to change, but it's stuff we've seen before, and it's stuff we've figured out how to work. There are constraints we've figured out how to work within before. And so I think we can figure our way out through this, but just be prepared that it's going to be very different. And I tweeted something about this the other day. I think, Portland founders are used to having these conversations. Our investment community does tend to take fewer risks than other communities. And so our founders have had the opportunity to have these kind of conversations. I think those conversations are just going to be everywhere now. It's not that there's going to be some, secret risk tolerant community full of investors. I think everybody's going to be fairly risk averse throughout the remainder of 2020 and perhaps longer. So I think we just have to wait and see. Hope that helps. All right. Okay, we got about 15 more minutes. And if there are questions that I don't get to, I will try and get written responses to folks. So hopefully that'll help. Let's see okay, stuff's starting to resort. Okay, let's do this one because this is an easy one. How do you apply to Pi and when can you? Also, how do you apply to Pi Shop? So generally, I will answer this as it worked in the past. Generally, you would apply to Pi. We would open up an application. It was a written application, much like many accelerators do. Very kind of high level. Who are you? What are you building? Why are you the team to build it? How do you think Pi can be helpful? How can you be helpful to Pi? And we generally open that up in the summer, leave it open for a month or so, and then start our selection process. It remains to be seen how we'll do that this year. Obviously, we're going to kind of have to reformat Pi. Pi and I didn't describe it, so for folks who don't know Pi, it's very much we refer to it as a residential program. So all of our companies share the same workspace. They work out of there as if it were their office. And so that dynamic is going to have to change this year. And we're going to have to figure out how to do this in a virtual kind of remote environment. So it remains to be seen when applications will open, but we generally recruit for both Pi and Pi Shop at exactly the same time. We don't expect you as a founder to decide which program would be better for you. For some folks, it's obvious. For some folks who have both a software and hardware solution, it's not always as obvious. So we just kind of do one application and allow you to self-select if you want, but if you don't, that's fine too. And then maybe to take you through the rest of the process, you go through the application. We do kind of a first go through the application, kind of select companies that we think might be promising. That usually kind of cuts the number of applicants in half. Then we go back to some of those applicants with either questions from mentors or questions from staff, just kind of clarification kind of things. And then based on that, that kind of further kind of winnows the group. And then we do face-to-face interviews with each of the teams that we're interested in collaborating with. And then from that process, we try and select, depending on how much space we have, usually about 10 for PyShop, because they're physical objects and we have physical shop space like 3D printers and CNC machine and laser cutter, those kind of things. Those companies take up more room. So we try and do about 10 there. And then our partnership with Puppet, which is Pi proper, that's the software as a service or other businesses that we're interested in. It really comes down, we're constrained by space. So this last time around, Pi and PyShop total had about 40 companies that we selected to bring through the program. And that was a lot. I don't know that we'll do that many. Again, we had to kind of test the limits of the space and our program. And yep, we reached those limits. So it probably less than 40 this time around. But that being said, on a virtual platform, we may be able to scale more effectively. I'm interested in kind of trying that phase of the experiment. So be on the lookout for May, June, maybe. Like if you subscribe to the Pi newsletter or just follow Pi on Twitter or whatever, we'll make a lot of noise about it and we'll give you plenty of time to respond. We also give you a cheat sheet so you don't come into the application blind. It's you've got all the details you need to answer the questions. We're not trying to have a gotcha or anything. So yeah, just keep an eye out. I'm really excited to start this next class because, like Pi does, it's going to be another experiment. This one's going to be really, really interesting. So I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to seeing your application if it was. Okay, let's do this one. As a startup who missed the last cohort, are there any options to become part of the Pi SaaS accelerator or suggestions? Yeah, that kind of applies to the previous question. We'll open up another application for a new cohort. It'll be very different again, as I said, but don't think that you've missed out. We will figure out how to do this in this new normal and are really looking forward to seeing the kind of companies that are being built in the midst of this weirdness and the way that founders are creatively inspired to solve the issues we're now experiencing. So, Pi started in the mortgage crisis. Like we get this stuff and we get that it's times like these that founders need more support than ever and more community than ever. And so we're really looking forward to providing that. So I hope if you're working on a SaaS product that you keep an eye out for the applications and join us. In the meantime, we're going to try and do more of this kind of thing where hopefully it's not just me talking at my computer, but we'll also have mentors showing up. So on Thursday, for example, Casey Jones, who is one of our mentors in residence for Pi, will be doing a Q&A on marketing and sales questions for, and there she is in the chat. Marketing and sales questions for startups and founders and that kind of thing. And then we're working on lining up a bunch more of those. So just stay tuned. If you follow Pi on Crowdcast, it'll ping you whenever those sessions are scheduled. And if we just ask for a little forgiveness, we're all moving really fast here. And so we will get out ahead of this and start scheduling these further out so that you can manage them with your schedule. But for the time being, they're going to be a little crunched. So just be on the lookout for those happening. And then a week from today, just to give you a little more heads up, Cami Chaos from Automatic, who is the company that manages WordPress, she will be talking about community, especially how you manage and work with community on a remote or virtual basis. So hopefully helping startups that have built a significant community do a better job of helping those folks feel connected in this environment we're in right now. So hopefully that answers that, Ron. Ooh, we're already getting to questions about the questions. Okay, here comes one. Do you think the frameworks we lacked, as I mentioned at the top of the show, are opportunities for new enterprises? Or do you mean what we need is at a city-state infrastructure level? If it's a startup opportunity, what do you see as a good start? Andy, that's a great point. Andy's like, why not both? Like, I think, we have the opportunity to partner we've partnered with Business Oregon before. We partner with Prosper Portland for one of our programs. So we've worked at the city and state level. And I think it does require both. It requires entrepreneurs, startup people to be leading the charge and informing those government or educational institutions or other established kind of infrastructure plays where they can be helpful. I don't think we can wait for the city or state or even nation to be building these solutions. I think it's got to come from a founder level. And again, kind of to an earlier point, the more the better right now. Like, don't worry about duplicating efforts or think that somebody else is already solving that problem. Like, I kind of loved the, a few days into this, suddenly everybody had lists of gift cards and community stores. And there was a lot of noise and a lot of repetition, but there was also a lot of catharsis and a lot of creativity in coming up with immediate solutions to solve needs that people were attacking. And I think that's the kind of work we need right now. We'll worry about kind of assimilation and editing and consolidating in the future. Right now, we just need entrepreneurs working on those ideas. So yeah, Jim, I think this is a huge opportunity for folks, either existing startups that have some of this infrastructure in play. Like, I think Crowdcast is amazing. Like, we probably wouldn't have been motivated to kind of use this kind of platform before, but now we have to use this kind of platform. So I think looking for those opportunities where companies have built infrastructure that can be leveraged in new and different ways, that's a really compelling opportunity. But also founders looking for gaps where opportunities exist, but the solution isn't quite there. What books? Yeah, I think they're over here. Let's do this one. Nice bookshelf. Thank you. With all the extra downtime at home, what books do you highly recommend to read? I think right now, and to some of this talking, Startup Communities is always one I come back to by Brad Feld, that kind of describes this dynamic of how communities can work more effectively, and like who needs to lead and who needs to feed and all that kind of stuff. I always appreciate that one. I think given the situation we're in, Give and Take is a really good one for folks to be thinking about. It's the how you give to a community versus what you're kind of taking, and what that dynamic is like, and who succeeds in those regards. I read a lot of business books. I would encourage people to read fiction right now too. Like, there's probably some pretty inspiring stuff in fiction that could be really, really important to what we're going through right now, that could be really beneficial with your founder brain on it. So I'd put that question to the group too. If you're reading a book, or have books that you'd recommend to folks, please put them up in the chat so that people can take a look at those. Love in the Time of Cholera might be a good one for people to read right now. Just hit people up with books that you'd recommend, because I don't know that I have the best recommendations for people. All right, we got like 1 more minute. Okay, this is a really good one. Let me end on this one. And if this was helpful, I can do it again. I don't know. Maybe I'll leave the recording up and see what kind of feedback we get on it. And if it's helpful and you want me to do another one of these, I'm happy to do it. But yes, we'll have mentors showing up to provide much more insightful and thoughtful kind of feedback for you. Final question. Can you join Pi if you live in Oregon but not in Portland? We have worked with companies throughout Oregon through our consumer products accelerator. We had companies from all around Oregon because we wanted to support the whole state and consumer products in that regard. I think, in the old version of Pi where we all sat together, we had companies that relocated from Berlin and Chicago and all over to kind of come through the program. I'm wondering if this next time around as a virtual company, if we don't have the ability to have companies from all over the state or all over the US or all over the world participate if they want to. So we're keeping that open. You definitely don't need to relocate to Portland to participate, even in the old version of Pi. It's just appreciated because one of the nicest things about Pi, and one of the things we cannot put a process around or really create without that kind of physical space and people sitting next to one another, is just the pure serendipity of a bunch of founders sitting around, all pursuing their dreams and kind of helping one another out. So we find a lot of value in the physical space. And so we encourage people to be in the physical space and if they can, but obviously this next cohort is probably not going to be there. So I hope that helps. I'm going to end with that one. Really appreciate folks showing up and helping us with this test drive. I think it was really valuable for me to hear the questions that people have out there and what folks are struggling with. We'll do more of these. Again, we'll have mentors showing up. I may co-host some of those to kind of help folks with the questions and that kind of thing. But yeah, let us know. Let us know on Twitter or hit me up on email. I would just love to hear how people are doing and what they're struggling with. I hope you're hanging in there. This is rough. And if you need to stop, just press pause and stop. It's okay. You're not gonna hustle your way out of this. So please take time for yourself, your family, get used to this new normal. And I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks for coming.